Welcome to the Guidelines Podcast. My name is Jonathan Copeland, and this is a podcast about human-centered design within South Africa. This episode will serve as an introduction to Season 2, where I'd like to give a life update, share about what I've been up to the last couple of months between the end of Season 1 and the beginning of Season 2, as well as share my vision for the format for Season 2 and how I'd like to change things, improve things, and modify. And I'd also like to share about, just reiterate my mindset around the show, so give almost a reintroduction to Guidelines Podcast. So let's get into it. Firstly, what is Guidelines Podcast about? Guidelines is about human-centered design and trying to understand what that actually means. With anything new within tech, we can come up with very fancy-sounding names, our job titles, our deliverables, but what are we actually doing? What is the value that we're providing to business, to users, to our clients? That's something that I want to be digging into. What does it mean to apply a human-centered design process within a project, within a team, within a product? And this show is about being a UX designer within South Africa. South Africa is relatively new to design, and so being this quote unquote new industry within a country that's new to design, there's space to get away with not necessarily knowing your stuff, and that's what I'm wanting to do. I'm wanting to move past the hype. I wanted to move past not knowing my stuff to having a deep understanding about user-centered design, about the rich history that this discipline has. I think that's been something that's been really blowing my mind over the last couple of months. UX is not a new discipline. It is actually an incredibly old discipline. We've just given it a new name. So if you look at a standard like ISO 9241, this was released in 1999. And it documents the user-centered process down to every single step, the types of deliverables. There's an annexure at the end of the document that even gives detailed overview on what kind of those deliverables, like how can you monitor whether you're following a human-centered process. I'm going to be working through that in one of the upcoming episodes. But that's been the kind of thing that's been on my mind, that actually there are people that have gone before in UX that have done incredible work that we can learn from. There've been books that have been written, articles, podcasts. So I've been wanting to dig into that. And that's what I've been doing over the last couple of months is going deep in my understanding and realizing that I have so much to learn. One of the things that I've realized was that there was a bit of imposter syndrome that creeped into my mindset around UX. That as I started to learn more and more and more and being exposed to masters in the industry, I realized actually I don't know much. And asked myself, why am I doing the podcast? And reminding myself that actually the qualification is not that you are a master, but that you want to learn. So if you hear to listen to guidelines and to hear from a master, that's not what you're going to find here. But I'm very happy to point you towards masters. And that's something that I'm really wanting to dig into over this next season, is to bring out the fundamentals of UX and share that with you all. My goal is to learn publicly and take the time to dig into existing work. So please, if you are aware of any books that you think that I should read, or if you're aware of any masters in the discipline, and if you are one of those masters and you'd like to share and be a part of the podcast, please let me know. I'd love to have you on and have a conversation with you. And so that's what Guidelines is about. Guidelines is about developing a deeper understanding about a human-centered design approach, and then sharing it out with other people, and having a formalized way of doing that, and to commit to doing it. And so that people can come and I can learn by sharing, people can learn by consuming, and we can create a community. I think that's another thing that really inspired me to start the podcast in the beginning. I've always looked at communities like the Silicon Valley design scene and larger companies like Apple and Microsoft. And there's such a strong design culture there. And that's something that I'd like to develop more in South Africa, that we have this strong design community where we're all growing together as an industry. So what have I been up to between the end of Season 1 and where we are now, the beginning of Season 2? 2019 was a pivotal year in my life. I went into my last year of university of BIS Multimedia, which is the degree that I've now finished. I got married, I moved in with my wife, and I started my first salary-based job. I'd like to tell you a bit more about my degree. And BIS Multimedia is a combination of 3 different degrees. It's offered at the University of Pretoria here in South Africa. And it combines computer science, information science, and multimedia. We spent about 70 to 80% of our time actually programming, doing things like concurrency, artificial intelligence, data structures and algorithms, security, networks, the full bandit. We even did assembly language optimizations. In terms of multimedia, our final year project was to make a video game, and our group actually ended up placing second overall, and I've written an article about that that you can find on LinkedIn and Twitter and all those places. Paths, the Brave Kodama was an MVAR game. And we also did things like horror movies and interactive story-based games and web development. We had to make our own book sharing website. And then information science, we had to look at how to categorize information and how to store information well. And so it was a incredibly helpful degree, but also a very difficult degree, especially in that last part of the year. It got very tough, and there were times where I definitely doubted and questioned whether I was actually going to make it in the end. However, last year ended up being an exceptionally good year. I did well. I actually qualified for honours in the end. One of the themes of the second half of last year was saying yes to the right things and saying no to the wrong things, and doing less things better. One of the things that I decided for this year was to carry on that theme, and honours just didn't make sense in the bigger scheme of things. It's a huge privilege to have got in. However, what I would like to do now is focus on Sand Dollar design. Also, spend some more time maturing in the field of UX. And so I finished my degree last year. I also got married last year. So in the middle of the year in July, I married Bianca Jade. Oh man, it was so great. Marriage is incredible. And moving in together and having our own space has been the most incredible journey. And in the second half of the year, I almost realized that I needed to focus on, as I was saying, focus on less things. So I was focusing on Bianca. I was focusing on finishing up my degree. Lastly, focusing on Sand Dollar design. Being a part of the team at Sand Dollar, learning from our CEO Yaku, has been the most incredible privilege. We work with our team is so strong and so experienced. And over the course of last year, I started to learn and understand what I didn't know. I think there's a whole phrase that you don't know what you don't know. And being around these experienced designers, businessmen, I was able to actually understand where the gaps in my understanding about UX were. And that's some of the things I want to do with season 2. Is I know that I'm not the only one who has these, and I actually would like to share a lot of these solutions to the gaps that I've realized in my understanding. And so those are the major things that happened last year. I finished up my degree. I got married, did well on my first salary-based year at work. And in the second half of the year, I decided to just focus on those things and bring back the podcast this year. And so with that said, season 2 is now upon us. This has been the introduction. And I'd like to just share a bit about how I'd like to format things going forward. So I enjoy interviews, and I'd like to carry on doing interviews. However, I'd like to introduce a new format into the show, which is something I'd like to call deep dives. So there are a lot of topics within UX around specific things, and I would like to dedicate shows to one specific topic and by myself dig deep into it and almost treat it like a keynote, where I prepare beforehand, spend about a month researching and putting together a script around it, and then share a concise breakdown of that with you. And so the first one that I'm going to be doing is a breakdown of ISO 9241210, which is the fundamentals of human-centered design. However, there are a bunch of other topics that I'd like to get into. And so I'll treat these deep dives as episodes where I can just speak by myself and share about what I'm learning around a specific topic. Maybe I can even do a couple of episodes on it. So last year we did an episode on plain language with Letitia Castles. That was great. I really enjoyed that. But I would like to dig even deeper into plain language. It is becoming more and more of a thing. The scale that we're looking at, so you're looking at people who don't just speak English, you're looking at multiple different languages and education levels, but also as we're getting more to conversational UIs, that will become more and more of a thing. We're looking at things like Alexa and Siri. Those are still at the very beginning of their journey, and I'd love to dig into how we can explore that more. So definitely getting into plain language, definitely some other conversations coming up. So we're going to do interviews and we're going to do deep dives. Those are the two major formats that we're going to be working with. And then at the end of each episode, I'd like to wrap things up. And for that, I'd like to share about work that's currently inspiring me, helpful resources, as well as defining terms and answering questions. I think that there are a lot of buzzwords that can get thrown around within UX, within design, within tech. So I'd like to go through a term and then define that with you. Some of the things that are inspiring me already are the Microsoft dual screen device. I think it's called Duo and Nuo. But I'm really excited about those, and I'm going to share a bit more about those in the future. And so that's the format going forward. Interviews, deep dives, and then wrapping it all up with things that are inspiring me, sharing resources, defining terms, answering questions. It's been so good to share my vision for the next stage of the podcast. And I can't wait to get into the first episode, and that's going to be a deep dive. But for now, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And please reach out. You'll notice in the show notes, you'll see that there's a way for you to send voice notes. So the podcasting app Anchor that I use allows you to actually share feedback. So you can, if you have any questions, please reach out via that format. Or you can even reach out to me on Twitter @JMKopal. Otherwise, catch you in the next one. Bye.